Hello and welcome to the Reading Room. I can pretty much guarantee that you won't have heard of my guest in this episode, unless you happen to be a mutual friend of ours, that is. I wanted to explore what it's like to be a writer at the beginning of their career, drawing interest from publishers but still waiting for one of them to say yes. Now, if you love books and you've got friends that love books, chances are that you've got at least one of those friends that's an aspiring writer. So today on the Reading Room, I thought I'd bring in one of my aspiring writer friends. Detty Tyler, welcome to the Reading Room.
Hello.
Hello. Now, you are an unpublished writer, but you're not an unrecognised writer.
True,
because you were shortlisted for an award.
I was, yeah, I was. Last year, in fact, nearly a year ago, I was shortlisted by Orion Publishing and the Good Housekeeping magazine for the top 10 new novelists for 2014, and that was for my book Clean House. So yeah, that was fantastic, because it was, sometimes I think it is just that need to have somebody to recognise that what you've written is good, and otherwise you're sending things out to agents all the time and it can be very disheartening. So that was good.
Now, I did read, I think there was a couple of chapters that went up online, and I read your synopsis. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about that book was it was a very carefully constructed book.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about last night as I was looking through the synopsis again was, do you actually plan out your novels before you get into the nitty-gritty of writing them?
Yes. I think that I do, actually, because I know some people don't. They just let it flow. But for me, I need to have a bit of an idea about how it's actually going and how it's going to end, I think. So then I just fill it in. But I think with Clean House, it was a concept that came to me, I know it was I had a dream, which I know a lot of writers say they've had a dream and then they wake up and they think, oh, I have to write that down. And I did. And but then as I developed it further and further and thought about it, I liked the idea of playing with sort of the first person and the third person, and also about how to construct the book. So one chapter would focus on the first person, and it would be the protagonist, Margaret, in the present time, as she cleaned the rooms of this house. And then the next chapter, the ones that sat in between, would be in the third person about Margaret, as she had been in the past in a significant relationship that you could link to each of the rooms, that now in the present she's cleaning. So I like the structure of the book. And I know when I spoke to the editors at Orion, because I did actually go down to meet them as part of the competition, and when we got shortlisted, we all spent the day with them. And one of the things that the editor had really liked was the actual structure with the words and the layout and the way it was put together and the way it played between the past and present and the first and the third person.
Because it is a very well plotted novel, and it's nice that they appreciated that.
Yeah.
But you were shortlisted, but you weren't the winner.
No.
And I think was one of the prizes as being the winner was the thing about being published.
Well, there were 10 of us shortlisted and 9 of us were able to make the day in London, and it was just such a fantastic experience. I don't think any of us felt that they were a loser, as much as we'd all have liked to win, because you did win, I think it was a £25,000 cash prize, which enabled you to sort of take the time if you needed to get your book finished, and obviously get the contract and get it published, which everybody obviously wanted to do. But I think just the very fact that all of us had got together and had the work recognised, we spent a fantastic morning at Orion, met lots of different editors and were shown around and learned, some of the tricks of the trade, I suppose, and how it operated, which is all a bit of a mystery when you're unpublished. Things about how do you make your money, and how is it all accounted for, and how do you pay tax on it? All these sorts of questions.
Now, there must be a point where you're thinking, I'd quite like to write, and there's a point where you're right in the middle of your first novel and you're working away at it. Just tell us about that journey or that step from I want to be a writer to I'm writing now. To
getting on with it, I know. This is the thing. I think I've written 2 full novels and I'm halfway through my 3rd one now. And I wouldn't say it gets any easier either. Not just with your first novel, but any big novel that that you're going to take, especially when you're not published, because the incentive is very difficult. And when you're working full time and you've got family and everything else, it is quite difficult to find the time. But I think the first big novel that I undertook, because I've always written poetry when I was younger, and I've written short stories, and I'd always liked writing and reading. But then I went to uni and you end up reading and writing lots of things which are nothing to do with creativity really. So I felt, when I finished all of that, it was time to get on, and I had this idea for the book which actually was Clean House, because that was the first book I ever wrote. And I thought, I thought about it and plotted it out and planned how I was going to structure it. And I thought you can dream about it and you can think about it and you can tell people about it, about, this fabulous book that you've got, and and everybody thinks it's marvellous and it's a great idea, and you still haven't written it. The only thing to do is to actually sit down and write it. And it's really difficult.
So as a full-time professional, how do you, in another career, how do you find the time to sit down and write?
I try and write usually, it's usually on an evening. If it's a weekday, I'll try and spend a couple of hours. And on a weekend, I might do more in the morning. So I actually like morning writing more. I prefer to write in the morning. But of course, with work and everything, that's not normally something I can do in the week. I take, maybe a weekend away with a friend of mine who also writes, and we spend, a good couple of days really just going for it. I had a few days off last week, over Easter, where I just did nothing but really focus on my writing. So it's really just you've got to just make the time. And you could say, well, I haven't got the time. But that if you really want to do something, then it's like everybody says, you will make the time. And that's why it's taken me years and years, I suppose, to get the books done. But once I start with them and I make the time, it flies, really.
So have you ever studied creative writing or done any of the many creative writing courses I've seen in the backs of magazines?
No, I haven't. And I think probably I should do, because I think sometimes agents look for that. They ask you, have you done any creative writing? When I went to the Orion publishers, they wanted to know if everybody had done creative writing courses. Did they belong to book clubs? Did they do, sort of writing clubs, writing groups? I have got a friend who writes, and we spend a lot of time, sort of looking at each other's work and talking about writing and discussing plot ideas and things. And we are thinking of going away to maybe a retreat or a writer's course later on in this year, just to see what it's like, really. But no, I haven't really, because I think that is, again, it's about the time.
At what point in your life did you even start thinking, I'm going to start writing now, I'm going to be a writer?
I think I've always liked the idea of it. I've always liked the idea of writing. When I was younger and I travelled around a lot, I used to write quite a lot of poetry, and I used to want to be a journalist. That was one thing I used to do when I was younger. I used to want to do that. So I've always liked the idea of writing, but what I would really like to be a full-time writer. I'd like it to be something that could pay for my keep, and I could, just do nothing but write, really. And I really love that idea. But the reality of it is, the moment, and that's not a possibility. But I do feel that I feel more geared towards it. And I think although my work, I work full-time and it's very busy, and my son's getting older, so he'll be off doing his own things soon, which gives me a bit more free time for me to focus on my writing. So I do think, hopefully at some point somebody will pick up one of my books, and hopefully then, that's it. You just never know. You've just got to hope, haven't you? You've just got to have that dream and continue having that dream, because at the moment, there's always going to be agents, there's always going to be publishers, and they're always going to be looking for new writers. And although people say to me, why don't you think about self-publishing, why don't you want to do it online? And I haven't got the time to do all the marketing and promotion. I don't really want that, because in a way it's sort of, I need somebody to really like it and tell me it's good, and it has to be somebody like an agent. So that's quite probably old-fashioned of me, but for me that's what I want. And if I don't get an agent who's interested, or a publisher who's interested, say it can become a hard copy book that I see in a bookshop or somewhere like the library, then really I'd rather just keep it to myself.
So the theoretically cheap, simple, straightforward method of publishing an ebook, is that something that definitely
doesn't interest me at the moment? It doesn't interest me. I want my work to be something that somebody else thinks is really good and good enough to publish. Whether it's successful or not, then that would remain to be seen. But I think the idea of anybody can publish an ebook, anybody can do it. So, I could do that. But then the amount of time that and that's not to diss people who publish ebooks, because for some people that's a really great option. But it's just a personal choice. And for me, if I was to publish an ebook, for me to market it enough to make it successful and give me a career out of it, I haven't got the time to put into that because I do work full time and because I've got a son and, you know, and because I think that's what your agent's job is.
Literally and virtually, how many manuscripts do you think you've sent out then?
Gosh, I think with Clean House, I've probably sent that out, I would imagine, to about 30 agents. And obviously entered it for the competition, which was what I got shortlisted for. Maybe I need to do more competitions. And while they're out there, I'm quite happy, because at least they're out there, and I think, oh, you just never know, so you can have that little dream about what's going to happen when one of them gets in touch with you, and that's quite nice, and that can keep you going. And I think there's plenty of agents out there who will take the kind of work that I write. So I sent Clean House out, and then I revised it after going to meet with Orion, and I had an editor who was fantastic, and she gave me some really good feedback on the structure and other things, and I shifted a few of the chapters around, and so then I sent it out again, because and I can then say, oh, it actually got shortlisted, so it sort of creates a bit more interest for agents. So that's currently going out again. Area 13, which was the sort of dystopian-y one, and that's more of a working title than what it would probably be called, that's gone out to, I would think, probably about 15 agents. And there's not much success going on with that one either. Then the one I'm doing now, which is the one I really like this one, which is Safe, that's gone out to 8 agents in the last week, because I do feel it's ready to go out there a little bit. And so we'll see. But there's probably a good 30 or 40 I could send it to.
After the break, we'll be talking more about the writer's journey, but viewed from a point closer to its beginning than its end.
So you're talking about agents and publishers, but is it agents that you're sending the works out to? So yeah. What's the difference between an agent and a publisher?
I always think of agents are like your gatekeepers, aren't they? They're the ones who they're the ones who are like sort of the interface between you as a writer and the people who are going to publish your work. That's how I see an agent, and their job is to support you and to help you produce the best work you can, and to sell it really to the publishers who will actually produce the finished material. So you want your hard copy books with the nice design covers, and if you might want it in audio books or in different languages, etc., etc. The publishers are the ones who produce it. The agents are the ones who know the publishers really, really well, and will know which publishers will be interested in your work, and will introduce it to the publisher for you, and then help you to get the best price you can, because it's in their interest to do that, because the best price for you is best price for them, because they obviously work on commissions and things. And you will develop a relationship with your agent, who will then be there hopefully to help develop your whole writing career.
Getting back to your novels,
yes.
Of which you're on your 3rd novel now.
Yeah.
Area 13,
yes.
Working title.
Yes.
Which I'm glad to hear, because I was worried that I can think of at least 2 films that sound...
Oh, I know.
But you need a working title.
I need a working title, and it's one of those ones that is difficult to think about.
Sci-fi is often seen as a bit of a male preserve.
It is.
But some of my favourites, and I'm a big sci-fi fan, some of my favourite sci-fi stories and novels have actually been written by female authors.
Yeah.
Is there a female perspective? Is there something that women authors can bring to sci-fi?
Well, I think so, and I think that the book that I wrote, so we'll call it Area 13, is very much a female perspective. So I like Margaret Atwood with all the stuff like The Handmaid's Tale and that type of thing, and it was very much set in the future, in a sort of dystopian future, obviously, and but it was very much looking at it from a female perspective, because it's based on 2 main characters, which are a couple, but it's set in a world where they have to apply to have children. So it's very much about their relationship, and it's a very conservative world, if you like. So it's very prescriptive. They have to abide by lots and lots of rules, and they live in a confined city where it's seen to work, and society works very well because it abides by all these rules, etc. And if you're on, and the world on the outside is not as nice type thing. I feel it explores a lot of emotional stuff, because there's also a plot about young people and young children being trafficked for sex. So it's sort of in a way reflects some of the issues that we have today, because things like that probably you'll never, you know, it's just timeless. You know, they're issues that will survive, unfortunately. So it sort of looks at some of the things that you could see, well, actually they're quite common to some of the things we see today, because you can look at different countries in the world, and you know they can only have one child, and you know all these sorts of different rules and regulations, but it's about how they deal with it in their future while they're trying to have their own family within this world. So that's...
Yeah, I do think maybe one of the things that, if there is a female perspective to science fiction, is, I hate to say that it's more domestic, because I don't think it's more domestic, it's more maybe looking at emotion,
and
exactly, and families,
caring, and yeah, it is. I think so, and I think that's something that's missing. And because I loved things like The Handmaid's Tale, and you know, and sci-fi. I'm not particularly interested in sci-fi, fantasy sci-fi, or aliens and that sort of thing. You know, I mean, I think there's some great writers like that, but it's not the sort of stuff that I would write. I prefer more of sort of how about people and their emotions and psychological effects, and you know, on how the world impacts on them and their relationships. And I'm also very interested with all my characters in all my books about what you see is not always what they are, you know, who they are. So it's about a society view, what society's view of success is. And we portray this image of, you know, of success, and, you know, whether you are a TV presenter in Clean House, or whether you are a successful solicitor, as in the book that I'm writing now. Because society's view is that, well, if you've made money and you're successful and got a great job, then you must be a very good person. And if you're poor, or you know, you're living on if you look at things like Benefit Street, for instance, and all those sorts of programs, and Skin, you know, obviously they're made out to be these really terrible people because they've got no money and because they're, you know, on benefits, and without any explanation as to how these people and how people get like that, you know, into these situations.
Now, the one that you write at the moment, Safe, it's at its most basic. I don't want to spoil it for the readers, but it does explore a relationship between a professional woman and a young, damaged, criminalised youth.
It is, yeah, it does.
And I know from the work that we've done together outside of literature that you work in the voluntary sector, like I do quite a lot. Did your experiences of the voluntary sector and the work that we do inform how you portrayed those characters? I
think, yes, definitely. I think not so much even just the work within the voluntary sector, but the work with young people, because we work with all sectors, don't we? And we, you know, getting involved in things like the safeguarding of young people, the exploitation of young people who are young offenders, the abuse that happens within, you know, home settings. I think all those things we're very much aware of with the work we do with young people. And it's something that often isn't really sort of looked at sympathetically within the media. And it's very much about, look at these young offenders, look at these hoodies, you know, and without really looking at why people are like that. And I think the work that I do, you do see a lot of the abuse of young people, and it doesn't matter whether you are from a successful background or have a lot of money or very middle class. Where, you know, people still abuse young people, and it doesn't matter whether you're a female or a male. They can still abuse young people, and I think that's something that really isn't looked at too much within literature. And I think I wanted to have it as a female protagonist who potentially, you know, would be the exploiter, without giving too much away. Because if I hadn't done it as the female, and I had done it as a male with a female youth, that would have just been something that we see all the time.
So is this the first time that you've started to take bits of your life or bits of your knowledge and experience rather than your life? I'm not saying that you're the woman.
No, please don't say that.
I was particularly actually thinking more of the youth.
Yeah,
Is this the first time you've taken bits of your life experience and put them into a novel?
I think no, because when I did Area 13, that concentrates as well on the exploitation of young people and trafficking them for sex, although it's set in a future. But it's the female Martha, she works for what you would think of as a charity, I suppose, in the future. So she works for, sort of helping these families on the outside, and particularly with the ones with children, to try and get the children integrated into the city.
Your novels, I know you said commercial women's novel, but I thought there was a hint of literary novel in your first work.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Okay.
The kind of the crafting of the structure and the overall construction
made
me think.
Literary himself, but
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
Edge of thriller.
Yeah.
Are you wanting to cover and hop between lots of genres? Are you hunting for a genre?
No, I think I really liked the sci-fi one because, again, that was something, I think I'd had a dream and I woke up and I had this idea, and I spent the next sort of, few months crafting it and working on it, and very sort of surprised, to be honest, that I had this idea. And the more I thought about it, the more I started coming up with other bits and other things. And in the end, I thought, I'm going to have to write it because I actually quite like this. But I have written sort of what I would think of as the first book, and I think there would be a second book. So we're sort of, but I'm not working on that one until somebody wants the first one, because I've got other things that I want to work on. So I suppose my main interest is working on fiction that I think women would be interested in, probably more so than men, but men maybe. But I think it is about exploring. I like to explore the female psyche. My friend who I write with, sometimes she always laughs because my endings are always, she always thinks they're really horrible. But they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. I think, it's just the reality for people sometimes.
So you think maybe writing for women or women's literature is a genre in its own right that's maybe stronger than what we'd think of as being traditional genres?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I mean, I just write what I think is interesting to me to write and what the ideas are. I mean, I know exactly what's happening with this one I'm writing, as I did with Clean House, and I have a very good idea of what I would do for the one with the prepper lady, in it. So I shape it. But it often just appears, it sort of pops into my head and think, oh yeah, that would be good. And I sort of write it all down and then just build it. And then the time comes when you actually have to get on and write it. I don't write lots of plans. So I sort of know and I'm confident in where it's going, but I haven't got reams and reams and reams of research that I've done, or I've done some research, particularly for this one, because she's a solicitor, which is not a field I'm involved in at all, so I had to go and spend some time interviewing a friend of mine, and who was very helpful. And but I think maybe you could class it as well, it's women's fiction, but men might be interested in it as well.
I read lots of women's fiction.
Yes.
I really don't distinguish.
I know. I don't know why they have this thing as women's fiction.
I thought Woman on the Edge of Time was just a novel.
Yeah.
I read Bridget Jones' Diary and didn't.
Yeah, which is.
I found out it was women's chick lit
after
I'd read the second novel.
Yeah.
Now, published or not, are you ever going to stop writing?
No, I don't think I can really. I don't think so, because it buzzes around in your head. I think what I want to do as well is to do something with my poetry, because I wrote quite a lot of poetry quite a long time ago, and I thought some of it was quite good, and I've never really done anything with my poetry. And I suppose maybe I should send that out to somebody, just as something different to do.
Yes, well, as a poetry lover, I've got to say maybe we need to talk at some point more about your poetry.
Okay, yes.
But for now, Detty Tyler, thank you very much for joining us here on The Reading Room.
Thank you very much.
I really think it was worth spending time in the reading room with an unpublished writer. If I talk to a professional writer about what it's like before they made it, I always wonder, has time softened their feeling about the grind of submission and refusal? But hopefully next time I talk to Detty, it's going to be about a debut novel. For more interviews and features, go to culturezone.org.uk. This series is made in association with the Hull Library Service and is made possible by the support of the James Reckitt Library Trust.